The Single Mom Success Podcast, Episode 6. Heather Wells and the Single Mom blog present Single Mom Success, the place for single moms to find support, inspiration, and the path to their own success. Hey everybody, welcome to the Single Mom Success Podcast. I hope you are having a fantastic day after a fabulous weekend. We are actually getting ready for St. Patrick's Day here. It's the day before St. Patrick's Day. I'm not sure about where you guys live here in Colorado. There's several events that happen around St. Patrick's Day. And so the first is this weekend there was the running of the green here in Colorado, which I think is like a 7K race or something of that nature, which I'm not sure of the specifics because I don't run. I have a running long-standing joke that I say I only run when chased, and even then it depends on who's chasing me because if I can take you, I'm not going to run from you. So, but I had several friends who participated in that, and that was a lot of fun to see them do that. And then we have a St. Patrick's Day parade out here, and everybody comes out in green and has all the crazy outfits and things like that. And then my daughter, and you might be familiar with this if you have young kids, they at school they make leprechaun catchers, which is kind of it's like a shoebox with a glitter and stuff to lure and trap leprechauns. It's kind of like a leprechaun trap, I guess. So, but which is very cute, and my daughter enjoys making those. And so there's a lot of shenanigans that are coming our way for St. Patty's Day. So I hope that you guys have some stuff planned to enjoy that as well. So getting right into it and diving into today's podcast episode. This podcast episode was brought about because of some recent drama with my daughter's dad. Nothing too major, but it definitely, well, here's the thing. It's not major, but a few years back it would have been major. And that's all because of the topic of today. And that topic is being able to treat your ex like an equal, even if it kills you. And the reason that I brought this up is, like I said, there was a little bit of issue over the weekend. And actually, no, not this weekend, maybe last weekend. Anyway, it was just something that was brought up and I was discussing with a friend about it, and she made the statement of, wow, if this had been a few years back, your head would have probably exploded. I'm like, yeah, you're right, it probably would have. And all of that has to do with the way that I changed the way that I deal with my ex. And so this is a topic that's may not necessarily be relevant for some people. So, for example, like I said in many podcasts before, I have two very unique sets of circumstances with the fathers of my children. My boys' father is not in their life. He's not allowed to be. He is not allowed around my children. So obviously, my relationship with him, there is no treating him like an equal. He's just not a part of my relationship. I would like to say that I have evolved to the point where I have been able to forgive him for the things that happened and what happened to our son, but I'm not that evolved yet. I haven't gotten to that point. I hope that someday, maybe I will, because I think that will bring me even more sort of inner peace, but at this point I just haven't gotten to that point, and I'm at least evolved enough at this point to acknowledge that I'm not yet evolved enough for that. But yeah, so that's definitely a whole nother unique set of circumstances. And, there may be people out there who, their exes were abusive, or, they came from violent, situations, or, there may not necessarily, this may not apply to everyone, but for those of us who do co-parent and who need to co-parent or are looking at the possibility of co-parenting, this is going to be right down your alley. So the treating your ex like an equal, even if it kills you, is so crucial, and it's something that I struggled with for a very long time. In the initial beginnings when my ex and I first split up, there's a lot of anger, there was a lot of hurt from my side. And rightfully so to an extent. He and I split up under bad circumstances. He was still drinking a lot at that point, which is where a lot of our issues came from. It was definitely where all of our arguments came from. And, or at least not where they came from, but the reason that they were so bad was because of his drinking. And so when we split, it was very hard for me. And then compounded on that was the fact that he started seeing someone new within a week of our splitting, which led me to believe that he was very likely seeing this person before we had split. So it's definitely something that was difficult. And in the beginnings, because of my anger and because of my upset and because of the way that I felt about the situation, I was very controlling when it came to our parenting, and I treated him, and I have to say, I think it was sort of a 50-50 split. 50, half of it was because of the anger and the hurt, and the other half was because of just the lack of experience of co-parenting. Like, I didn't know how to do it. I had no idea how to share parenting responsibilities. So, and knowing that I had parented before, I had, 2 other children, and he didn't have any kids. So the way that I treated him initially in the beginning and the way that we treated each other was very bad. It was not a good set of circumstances. We were very nasty to each other. There was a lot of times that things became just really ugly and mean. And, from my perspective, it was because of the hurt, and it was because of the anger, and also because of the fact that, there are a lot of times that I was truly very condescending to him when it came to parenting. Like, who are you to say anything? Like, I'm the parent. I know what I'm talking about. You have no idea what you're talking about. Like, how could you possibly have any idea what you're talking about? Right? But then also because, from his perspective and his side of it, well, I can't say from his perspective, but what I believe is one of the big factors is, again, he was still drinking very heavily at that point, and that caused a lot of problems, because dealing with him drunk and dealing with him sober are 2 different things, and very difficult circumstances when he's drinking. So we had a lot of problems, and we had a lot of pitfalls, and part of that was because of my inability to be able to accept him for the father that he was being, as opposed to wanting him to be the father that I wanted him to be, right? Like, he wasn't living up to the standard that I had set. And how dare he? How dare he not meet that standard, right? And I think that that's natural. We want the best for our children. We want the other parent to live up to an ideal. We want ourselves to live up to an ideal, right? Like, for the better part, we as parents, we're kind of hard on ourselves. Like, if we don't feel like we're, we judge ourselves really a lot. Like, we see the one mom who's just got all of it together, and she's perfect, and like, she throws the best parties, and she's just got it all together. We sort of hold ourselves to a standard, and we're like, God, I suck because I can't do that. Right? Like, I can't make that Pinterest cake, or I can't, my birthday parties don't turn out like that, or I don't look that good when I go out as a mom. Like, how does she do it? Like, and you don't know that she's got a nanny at home who helps with the kids so that she can get ready, or maybe she's got extra help, or who knows, maybe she's always happy and cheerful because she's on lots of really good meds. You never know like somebody else's circumstances, but we hold ourselves to a certain standard, and we tend to judge ourselves very harshly. And on the flip side, we also tend to hold the fathers of our children to a very high standard as well. And in a lot of aspects we should, because we want the best for our children. But when we utilize that to degrade or demean or ridicule the other parent, then it becomes a problem. Then it becomes an issue. Because here's the thing, and I'm not saying this as a way to dismiss any bad behavior. Obviously, if they have an addictive personality, if they're addicted to, if they're an addict, if they're an alcoholic, if they're struggling with any type of addiction or anything like that, obviously then that's a potential threat or danger or hazard to your child. just as the drinking became an issue for my ex. There were several instances with he and his now wife were drinking while my daughter was there became an issue, and it was one where the courts had to get involved, and I had to, request that they not be allowed to drink, and the courts ordered them not to drink while they had our child. And, there've been several instances where, some stuff has happened, and there's been some domestic issues where, we've had to sit down and establish some really serious rules about what's going on when our daughter is there, because even though it happened while, on his watch, he also agrees and he understands that, he doesn't want that for our daughter. And so, but the few times when things like this did happen, in the beginning, because I was so hurt and angry and judgmental and having so many issues, anytime even the slightest issue would come up, it would become a huge, huge battle. It was very ugly in the beginning. And it caused a lot of problems. And to be perfectly honest, we, as parents, if you are co-parenting, it's so important and so crucial for the success of your parenting, for your relationship with your child's relationship with the other parent. Like, it all sort of ties in together, and it is really crucial for you guys to be able to have a good, solid relationship. You don't have to like the person. Like, I don't like my ex. He's not my friend. I don't, see having, long, emotional, meaningful conversations with him. We don't go hang out after work or, anything like that. But, and I, to be honest, it's one of those where if it weren't for our daughter and he, if he dropped off the face of the planet, it really wouldn't faze me, and it's not supposed to, because he's my ex. Right? So if he moves on with his life and he and I never saw each other again, it wouldn't be a big deal to me, with the exception of our daughter. So because of our daughter, he and I are linked forever. And now we have to figure out a good, solid relationship, because it's really going to be important for our child. Because it's not fair to the child as they get older and they understand what's going on and they know that mom and dad don't get along and they don't like each other. Like, that's a hard position for that kid. That really sucks for the kid, to be honest. It really does. So being a parent sometimes means biting your tongue and being a better person to develop a good relationship with your ex, even if it's just civil, even if the best you can hope for is civil, then that's good. Because then at least your child knows that you guys are putting them in that position. You're important. That you're showing that it's important that you guys get along for them, right? And that's what I want for our daughter. So we went through a really long period of time where he, would try, and I would sort of knock him back down a peg or two. And sometimes it was a power struggle. Sometimes it was just me being angry. Not to say that there wasn't a reason for me to be upset, but there was not a reason for me to blow it up into the proportions that I did. And because of his drinking and the issues that he had back then, it definitely escalated very quickly on his side as well, and became very ugly on his side. So, it's just one of those things where I look back and I think, and I was like, God, we spent so many years just really kind of being at each other's throats, and it wasn't a good experience. It really wasn't. So I knew at some point I had to get past that. I had to be able to have a better relationship with him, and it took a big mind shift for me to really stop and go, no matter how much I rage, no matter how much I complain and bitch and moan, he's not going to change simply because I say he should, right? So I had to stop and think about it, and it took a lot of soul searching, and I realized that, like I said, I was judging him and holding him accountable for not meeting a standard that I had set. And while, again, there's still times when I tell him, look, you're screwing up, when he misses time with his daughter, or he, goes out the night before, and then the next day we don't hear from him until noon, 3 o'clock, and he's like, oh, I'm sorry, could I do this or that? I'm like, hey, it's your time with your daughter, and it's up to you how little or how much or how little you get, And it's just me kind of still being civil, but kind of calling him on it, being like, hey, man, you screwed up, and you need to acknowledge the fact that it's your time, and you have chosen to not spend it wisely with your daughter. So, but again, it's not me saying, oh, you're such a piece of crap, I can't believe you didn't show up, look what you did to your daughter, and blah, because at this point, she's old enough to tell him. And he's able to see now that she's old enough, when he doesn't show up, she's not upset anymore. She sort of expects it, which is the sad part. And me being able to tell him that and say, hey, look, your daughter was pretty much expecting you to be late because she knew you were going out. And the fact that your daughter knows that about you should tell you a lot. And it's not me being insulting, it's just me kind of calling him on it, but still trying to be respectful and treating him as an equal. Again, trying to bite my tongue, because there is a part of me that wants to be like, dude, you suck. You missed, your daughter's been waiting on you. And you suck because your daughter, she should be disappointed. She shouldn't feel like, oh, maybe my dad will show up or maybe he won't. She should be able to set her clock by you, right? If that was me and I only got to see my child every other weekend, I would be on time every time. And there's a big part of me that wants to say that to him. But as much as that makes sense to me, I have to know that it makes sense to him too. I have to think that he is feeling that as well. Dude, I missed time with my daughter and I'm the only one to blame for that, right? Because me just screaming at him about it, at that point, it becomes an argument between him and I. It becomes me trying to say, well, I'm better than you, and that's how he views it. Instead of when I say, hey, it's kind of like the way you treat your kids when you're trying to teach them responsibility. I mean, I know that sounds terrible, but it is. And sometimes that's how you have to deal with your other parent, because it helps save your sanity too. Really, it's getting so upset and so mad about it is only making you miserable. It's not causing them any problem. It's, they already know that they didn't show up, or they didn't do what you wanted them to do, or they didn't do what they were supposed to do. They know, and if they're upset by it, they're upset by it. You getting mad at them is not going to make them more upset by it. It's not going to make them feel more guilty. In all honesty, it's going to make them feel confrontational. And then you're going to end up in an argument, and then it's going to cause a problem. So that's why I say treat them as equals, even if it kills you. Treat them the way you would want to be treated. It's like the whole golden rule, right? Talk to them the way you would want to be treated. You wouldn't want somebody talking down to you about your parenting, right? You won't stand for that. But yet it's acceptable when you talk to the ex. And I understand that there's a lot of baggage that goes along with that, right? I mean, we had several years when my daughter was too young to know, where he would go on a bender and completely miss his weekend. Didn't show up at all. Right? Or call me, day and a half later, I haven't been feeling good. I'm like, well, are you hungover? Yeah. Well, sorry, you missed your time with your daughter. And then we'd go into the name calling, and it would, escalate very quickly. But, so there was definitely times, and there's a lot of baggage when it comes to he and I, and his parenting in the past. And, but none of that made our relationship stronger or better as parents. And knowing that we are going to be doing this for quite some time, it is so crucial and so important to be able to at least try to have that relationship. Even a civil one. Like I said, if civil is the best you can do, then civil is good, right? But at least you're not being nasty. At least you're not being condescending. And I see a lot of posts in some of the single mom groups that I belong to where there's a lot of anger, and I see that, and I recognize that. There's a lot of times where I've seen posts where it's like, oh, my son's dad or my child's dad decided to pop back in after, 10 years, and now he wants to be a dad. And how could he even think that? And I'm not going to let that happen. And you weren't here for the first 10 years and blah. So, and I can understand how that would be extremely hard. Like, you've been the one for 10 years. Wiping the noses and up with the fevers and dealing with the puking kid and the ear infections and, school and bills and money and, clothes and food and, raising a child by yourself without any help. And I understand that there would be a lot of resentment for somebody to just pop in after a period of time and expect to try and be a parent. But here's the thing. The way I look at it is you and we don't know their story. We don't know what happened and what it took for them to get to that point in their life. Maybe they had an addiction that they needed to take care of before they could be a parent. Maybe they needed to clean their act up. Maybe it took them 10 years to finally grow up and realize that there was a part of their life that they were missing out on, that they really wanted to now have. And while I understand it can be very easy to say, no, you didn't want to be there then, why should I let you be there now? But my thought on this is, if it were me, if the situation was reversed, and for whatever reason I had to leave my children, whether it was to clean up an addiction, whether it was to get my finances right, whether it was because mentally and emotionally I couldn't care for a child and it was better for them to be taken care of by someone else. If I finally got my act together and decided that I could be a parent, I would hope that somebody would give me that chance again with my children. And that they would be, I don't know, not necessarily forgiving, but at least understanding. And because of my child, I would look to potentially try and make that happen if they were able to be a healthy influence in my child's life. And that's really hard for me to say because with my boys' dad, like I said, I have not come to the point where I can forgive yet. And this is, again, not saying if it was somebody who abused their child or, if your ex was abusive or he harmed your children in any way or he was a danger to your children, I could see that being harder. I mean, if my boys' dad came to the door today and said, hey, I want to be a father to them, I would send him packing. You almost killed my child. I haven't, like I said, I haven't gotten to the point of enlightenment yet where I'm okay with that. But I have gotten to the point where, when my children reach, the age of, adulthood, 16, 17, 18, if they want to find and meet their father, I won't keep them from doing that. Because at that point, they're old enough. And they can face their father and they could, say, what happened? Why'd you do this? What, but then that's their decision as grown children. But, knowing that he was an addict and he was a drunk and he did what he did, it would be very hard. So I can understand how that may not work in every circumstance, and it may not be doable in every circumstance. But for those who, they're just upset because the guy didn't step up or he didn't want to take responsibility, if he's willing to try and step up and take responsibility now, if he's trying to be a part of their life now, again, treat them as equals, even if it kills you. Treat them the way you would want to be treated. Give them the respect that you would like them to give you. And it's definitely hard. It is. It's definitely something that, It takes work. It really does. But here's the thing. And it is hard, especially if they don't give you that respect in return, right? If you're trying to be respectful and you're trying to be the better person, and they come back to you and are like, nasty and just trying to cause a problem and trying to, get a reaction from you and trying to fight with you. And I've had that issue too. I've had that happen with my ex, and I was like, I had to say, look, I'm trying to work with you. I'm trying to be civil. If you can't, then our discussion is over. And again, you kind of got to treat them like a kid. If they're throwing a temper tantrum, you're like, okay, you get to sit in the corner until you can calm down, and then we can have a conversation. Because yelling at each other is really never going to get anything settled. It's never going to get anything solved, and it's just going to create more and more animosity. And so, as hard as it is, and as unfair as it is sometimes, that we always have to be the one to try and take the high road, you know what? We have kids, and there are many, many times in our lifetime where we are going to be the one who has to be the grown-up, damn it, and take the high road and be the better person and say, hey, for my child, I am willing to do this. I'm not willing to do it and get stepped on. I'm not willing to do it and get treated like crap. Okay? I am trying to give you the respect that I would like you to give me. If you can't do that, then our conversation is over. But I'm not going to get into it with you. I'm not going to call you names. I'm not going to treat you crappy. I'm going to treat you as an equal. I'm not going to treat you like less of a parent. And, that's where a lot of the issues came with my ex. He always felt like I was treating him like less of a parent. And in some instances I was, and I can acknowledge that I was. I mean, at least now I can acknowledge that I was. Back then, I couldn't do it. But now I still catch myself. And like I said, I'm not perfect. I still make mistakes. I still stumble. I still have instances where it's like a kind of a instinct or just like a gut reaction of, oh, I'm going to jump on you because of this one little thing. And I have to kind of rein myself back in. And there's been many times where I've apologized, where I'm like, I'm sorry, you're right. I overreacted. But, there was a time where, he called my daughter and talked to her about something that she had done that had upset her stepmother, and she got upset and started crying. And the second I saw that, the only thing I thought was, he just made my baby cry. He made my baby cry. Like, how dare you make my child cry? Like, not thinking that there's been many a times where I've chastised our daughter and made her cry, right? But he did it, like, and that's not okay. You can't make my daughter. It's not okay for you to make my baby cry. If I make her cry, I'm parenting. If you make her cry, you're being a jerk. Right? Like, that's like the instinct that I had. And it wasn't logical. It wasn't something that, I should have felt. But I did. That's like the instant protective nature that I have. And so, like, I'm like, hey, I understand that what she did wasn't cool, but you didn't need to make her cry. Like, don't do that. And so, he kind of got upset, and he's like, hey, if you want to, like, try and tell me how to parent, like, if you think you're so big and bad, like, he got really defensive. I'm like, okay. And that was like my first kind of key, like, indicator that I had sort of overstepped. I'm like, ooh, he got way defensive, way easy. I was like, okay, calm down. I will happily talk to you about this problem. Just call me. And he called me. He's like, I'm not going to have you get mad at me because I was parenting, right? Like, I'm sorry she cried, but I wasn't, like, I didn't say anything mean to her. I just told her that what she did was not okay. And, I couldn't help that she got upset, but I was being a parent. And I'm like, you know what? You're right. I overreacted. I'm sorry. But, and I still felt like, what happened, the situation didn't need to be handled the way it was handled. I felt that the stepmom was being oversensitive, but, not my call to make. But at the same time, I can't get upset with him for parenting, right? For being a parent. So, there's been times where I've had to apologize and say, hey, look, you're right. I'm sorry. I overreacted, right? And after that, it was cool. Like, everything was fine. But he does say that, and he's like, there's lots of times where you've just, like, you've told me that I'm not a good parent, or you told me how to parent. I'm like, can I understand that? And, I try really hard not to, but at the same time, There's nothing more important to me than our child. And so I can't guarantee that I'm never going to do it again. But I definitely try and temper the way that I say it, or kind of censor the way that I do it. I try and have a discussion now instead of just like accuse. I try and talk to him about things and say, hey, I need to talk to you about this. I'm concerned about this, or this is what happened and I have a problem, or this is what our daughter said and I just need to discuss this with you because this is the problem that I have with it, right? So the way I go about it, or try to go about it now, is much different than when we initially set off on our co-parenting adventure. It's more of a discussion and a conversation now, as opposed to an accusation. And that's where that treating the person as an equal is really important and really key, because you need to be able to have a dialogue with your ex. You know, if you want to have any kind of decent relationship with the father of your child, then being able to do this is going to be key. And I'm not saying it's easy, and I'm not saying it can always be done, because sometimes there's just people out there that can't do it. Sometimes the ex is just a flat jerk, and there's nothing that you can do that's going to change that. And so in circumstances like that, maybe it's just best to not have that dialogue. Everything is, short and sweet as possible, and that's it. Whatever you can do to make it work. But here's the thing. For a really long time, I was absolutely miserable with the relationship that I had with my ex. And it was one of those where anytime the phone rang, my stomach would knot up, because I was gearing up for a fight. Anytime she went to his house, I was gearing up for a fight that would happen when she came back. Anytime she came home, I was gearing up for that fight. Anytime I had to deal with him at all, it was always just this feeling of dread. And it shouldn't feel like that, because that just sucks. It really does. It sucks. And there's no way to say that you are a successful single parent if you always have that one lingering, bad feeling hanging out. You shouldn't feel like that. You shouldn't have to feel like that. And whatever you can do to make that so that it's not there anymore. And again, even if it comes down to being able to just swallow a little bit of your pride and be the better person, and start dealing with your ex in that fashion where you're trying to give them the respect that you would like them to give you, then, and it's like I said, it doesn't happen overnight. It takes time. It's definitely a long haul, but it is so worth it in the end, because, I can call up my ex now and be like, hey, what's going on with child support? Can you tell me when you're going to have it? And it's not a, hey, you owe me money, you're supposed to have this on the 1st. It's, yes, it's supposed to be there on the 1st. It sucks when he's late. But it's so much easier, because here's the thing. Anytime I would start my conversations out like that, where I'm like, hey, you're supposed to give me this money. What the heck is going on? The instant fight came out. It was instant. Well, I don't technically have to give it to you until the last day of the month. It's not late until the last day of the month. And he would deliberately hold it until the last day of the month, just because I called and started giving him a hard time, right? And I know that, right? And it would just piss me off more, and then I'd get into him, and he'd get into me, and it would just become this big, huge mess. So instead, now it's, hey, what's going on? Can you kind of give me an idea so I can budget? I'm just trying to make sure I got my bills taken care of. Can you tell me what's going on? And now it's a civil thing. He's like, I'm trying, I'm getting this is going to happen. I'm trying to get this check from this person, or this is, works real slow. I will get it to you as soon as I can. And I try and be as understanding as I possibly can about it. Now, are there times that I'm still frustrated? Yes. When I know that they've got new curtains and new bed furniture and I still haven't got my child support, yep, I get frustrated. But I don't go to him and say, hey, Brooklyn just told me you got all this new crap, but you still haven't paid me, right? I just get back on the phone and I'm like, hey, just checking in, see where child support is, what's going on with it. Because I know if I come to him with that attitude, no matter how I feel about it, the second I come to him with it, I'm going to get it right back. I'm going to get that attitude right back. I'm going to get nothing but a hard time, and it doesn't serve my purpose. It doesn't help the situation at all. and regardless of how I feel about how he spends his money, it's not my responsibility. Like, I have no say in that, right? As long as my child support comes, and like he said, it's not technically late till the end of the month. So, it's one of those, you kind of catch more flies with honey than vinegar, right? So sometimes it's just really important to remember to swallow your pride a little bit. Remember how you would like to be treated, and understand that if you come with accusations, the odds are you're going to get a lot of flack in return. So treat them as equals, even if it kills you. So I hope that you found this episode helpful. I hope that it gave you some inspiration, and that it was hopefully very, hopefully it helps you overcome some obstacles that maybe you're dealing with your ex, or hopefully it helps you start building a stronger or better relationship, or at least, like I said, even just a civil one. Sometimes that's all you can hope for, is civil. If you found this helpful, or if you have any circumstances or any instances where you have really helped build a better relationship with your ex, or if you do have a good relationship with your ex, we always love to hear those stories. Anytime, people are co-parenting and things are going really well, that's a great thing, and we love to hear that. Or if you're struggling with a certain situation and you'd like some advice, please feel free to comment. We love hearing from our listeners, or I love hearing from our listeners. Sorry, I don't know why I said we. I think it's the collective we that I talk about with me and my kids. Like, we are doing this and we are doing that. I love hearing from you guys. So please feel free to comment. And if you haven't already subscribed, we'd definitely love for you to subscribe. You can definitely do that on iTunes. So thank you so much. Hopefully you have a wonderful day and enjoy your week. You've been listening to the Single Mom Podcast, the place to go for support, encouragement, and maybe a few laughs along the way. Please also make sure you head on over to the Single Mom blog for more great stuff for single moms. We have resources, free things to print out, great articles. Can't wait to see you there. Be sure to leave feedback and comments, because we love hearing from other single moms. And if you like this podcast, please be sure to subscribe.